Hey everybody, and welcome back to the Witch's Nook. So the screen is black because I'm going to be reading another Brothers Grimm's story, and this is going to be called Our Lady's Child. And I haven't read this one over yet, so it's going to be completely new to me as I'm reading it to you guys. And if you guys like this video, please give it a big thumbs up and share it, and comment down below. Tell me what I can do better. And if you guys have a Brothers Grimm story that you want to hear, then you can leave that down in the comments and I will get to it. There is let's see here, just in the complete works of Brothers Grimm's, I have 210 books, like stories that they did. So, yeah, there's a lot for you guys to choose from if you guys want to look into them and see if you guys want me to read any of them. Okay, but here we go. Our Lady's Child. Near a great forest dwelt a woodcutter with his wife, who had only one child, a little girl 3 years old. They were so poor, however, that they no longer had daily bread and did not know how to get food for her. One morning the woodcutter went out sorrowfully to his work in the forest, and while he was cutting wood, suddenly there stood before him a tall and beautiful woman with a crown of shining stars on her head, who said to him, "I am the Virgin Mary, mother of Jesus. You are poor and needy. Bring your child to me. I will take her with me to be her mother and care for her." The woodcutter obeyed, brought his child, and gave her to the Virgin Mary, who took her to heaven with her. There the child fared well, ate sugar cakes, and drank sweet milk, and her clothes were of gold. And little angels played with her, and when she was 14 years of age, the Virgin Mary called to her one day and said, "Dear child, I must go on a long journey, so take into your keeping the keys of the 13 doors of heaven. 12 of these you may open, and behold the glory which is within them. But the 13th, to which the little key belongs, is forbidden. Beware the opening, or you would bring yourself upon great misery." The girl promised to be obedient, and when the Virgin Mary was gone, she began to examine the dwellings of the kingdom of heaven. Each day she opened one of them, until she had made her round of the 12. In each of them sat one of the apostles in the midst of the great light, and she rejoiced in all the magnificence and splendor, and little angels who had always accompanied her rejoiced with her. Then the forbidden door remained, and she felt a great desire to know what had been hidden behind it, and said to the angels, "I will not quite open it, and I will not go inside, but I will unlock it to see what I can see through the little opening." "Oh no," said the angels, "that would be a sin. The Virgin Mary has forbidden it. It might easily cause you unhappiness." Then she was silent, and the desire in her heart was not stilled, but gnawed there and tormented her, and let her have no rest. And once when the angels had all gone out, she thought, "Now I am quite alone, and I could peep in. If I do it, no one will ever know." She sought out the key, and when she had got it in her hand, she put it in the lock, and when she had put it in, she turned it round as well. Then all of a sudden the door sprang open, and she saw there a Trinity sitting in the fire and splendor. She stayed there a while, and looked at everything in amazement. Then she touched the light a little with her littlest finger, and the finger became quite golden. Immediately she ran away. Her terror too would not quit her, let her do what she might, and her heart beat continually, and would not be still. And the gold too stayed on her finger, would not go away, no matter how much she rubbed it and washed it. It was not long before Virgin Mary came back from her journey. She called the girl before her, and asked her for the keys of heaven back. When the maiden gave her the bunch, the Virgin looked into her eyes and said, "Have you not opened the 13th door also?" "No," she replied. Then she laid her hand on the girl's heart, and felt it beat and beat, and saw right well that she had disobeyed her order, and opened the door. Then she said once again, "Are you certain that you have not done it?" "Yes," said the little girl for a second time. Then she perceived the finger which she had become golden from touching in the fire of heaven, and saw well that the child had sinned, and had said for the third time, "Have you not done it?" "No," said the girl for the third time. "Then," said the Virgin Mary, "you have not obeyed me, and besides that you have lied. You are no longer worthy to be in heaven." Then the girl fell into a deep sleep, and when she awoke, she lay on the earth below, and in the midst of the wilderness she wanted to cry out, but could not bring her forth to make a sound. She sprang up and wanted to run away, but wherever she turned herself, she was continually held back by thick hedges of thorns, throughout which she could not break. In the desert in which she had been imprisoned there stood a hollow tree, and this had to be her dwelling place, and to this she crept when night came, and here she slept, here too. And she found shelter from storm and rain. But it was a miserable life, and bitterly did she weep when she remembered how happy she had been in heaven, how the angels had played with her. Roots and wild berries were her only food, and for these she had searched far and wide as she could go. In the autumn she had picked fallen nuts and leaves and carried them into the hole. The leaves were her food in the winter, and when the snow and ice came, she crept amongst the leaves, like a poor little animal, that she might not freeze. Before long her clothes were all torn, and one bit of them after another fell off of her. As soon, however, as the sun had shone warm again, she went out and sat in front of the tree, with her long hair covered her on all sides like a mantle. Thus she sat there year after year, and felt the pain and the misery of the world. One day, when the trees were once more clothed with fresh green, the king of the country was hunting in the forest, and followed a deer, and it had fled into the thicket which shut in this part of the forest. He got off his horse, and tore the bushes asunder, and cut himself a path with his sword. When he had at last forced his way through, he saw a wonderful beautiful maiden sitting under the tree, and she sat there, and was entirely covered with her golden hair down to her very feet. He stood there still, and looked at her full of surprise. Then he spoke to her, and said, "Who are you? Why are you sitting here in the wilderness?" But she gave him no answer, for she could not open her mouth. The king continued, "Will you go with me to my castle, then?" Then she just stood and nodded her head a little. The king took her in her arms, carried her to his horse, and rode home with her. And when he had reached the royal castle, he caused her to be dressed in beautiful garments, and gave her all the things in abundance. Although she could not speak, she was still so beautiful and charming that he began to love her with all his heart. It had not been long before he married her. After a year or so being passed, the queen brought a son into the world. Thereupon the Virgin Mary appeared to her in the night, when she was in her bed alone, and said, "If you will tell me the truth, and confess that you did unlock the forbidden door, I will open your mouth and give you back your speech. But if you persevere in your sin, and deny obstinately, I will take your newborn child away with me." Then the queen was permitted to answer, and she remained hard, and said, "No, I did not open the forbidden door." And the Virgin Mary took the newborn child from her arms, and vanished with it. Next morning, when the child was not to be found, it was whispered amongst the people that the queen was a man-eater, and had killed her own child. She heard all this, and could not say anything to the contrary, but the king would not believe it, for he had loved her too much. When another year had gone by, the queen again bore a son, and in the night the Virgin Mary came to her, and said, "If you will confess that you have opened the forbidden door, I will give you your child back, and untie your tongue, and if you continue in your sin and deny it, I will take away with me this child as well." The queen again said, "No, I did not open the forbidden door." And the Virgin took the child out of her arms, and away with her to heaven. Next morning, when this child was also disappeared, the people declared quite loudly that the queen had devoured it, and the king's counselors demanded that she had be brought to justice. The king, however, loved her so dearly that he would not believe it, and commanded the counselors under the pain of death to not say any more about it. The following year the queen gave birth to a beautiful little daughter, and for the third time the Virgin Mary appeared to her in the night, and said, "Follow me." She took the queen by the hand, and led her to heaven, and showed there her two eldest children, who smiled at her, and were playing with the ball of the world. When the queen rejoiced in this, the Virgin Mary said, "Is your heart not yet softened? If you will own that you opened the forbidden door, I'll give you back your 2 sons. But the 3rd time the queen answered, No, I had not opened the door. Then the virgin let her sink down to earth once more, and took her likewise her 3rd child. Next morning, when the loss was reported abroad, all the people cried loudly, The queen is a man-eater, she must be judged. And the king was no longer able to restrain his counselors. Thereupon a trial was held, and she could not answer and defend herself, so she condemned to be burned alive. The wood was got together, and when she was fast bound to the stake, the fire began to burn around her. The hard ice of pride melted. Her heart was moved and repentance, and she thought, If I could confess before my death that I opened the door. Then her voice came back to her, and she cried, Yes, Mary, I did it. And straightway rain fell from the sky and extinguished the flames of fire, and light broke forth above her, and the Virgin Mary descended with her 2 sons, her 2 little sons by her side, and her newborn daughter in her arms. She spoke kindly to her. He who repents his sin and acknowledges it is forgiven. Then she gave her 3 children, untied her tongue, and granted her happiness for her whole life. That was a pretty interesting story. Now, I understand it was a very Christian feel to it, but I liked it. It was a nice one. The next one that we're going to be reading is The Story of the Youth Who Went Forth to Learn What Fear Was. If you guys like this video, please give it a big thumbs up, and if you haven't already, please subscribe to my channel, and I'll see you guys next time when I'm reading the Brothers Grimm. Good night, good day, good afternoon. Have a good time whenever you're listening to this video. See you guys later. Bye!